This happened about a year ago in Tucson, Arizona. It was my first time visiting Arizona, and I had no idea how many allegedly haunted places were in the small downtown area of Tucson. It was really exciting for me as someone who was basically born obsessed with the paranormal and with mysteries in general. I was there with 2 other females, a friend I traveled with and an acquaintance who lived there and was hosting us. It was our first night there, and the woman we were staying with took us out to the city to have a few drinks. We visited a couple supposedly haunted bars and did a quick round of karaoke before we started walking home. By this time, our host was clearly pretty drunk, but my friends and I were very chill and clear-headed. The house we were staying at was located on the same street and just a couple blocks from the oldest bar in Tucson. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and we were talking and laughing, just enjoying the night. The streets weren't empty, but there wasn't many people out. When we turned the corner onto her street, the bar was about 2 blocks ahead of us and was brightly lit, but the area we were currently in was fairly dark. I was kinda looking down when my friend said, you guys, don't freak out, but there's a guy in a cape walking towards us right now." I looked up, and my stomach flipped. There was a man in a thick black, hooded cloak walking in our direction. I instantly felt uncomfortable because he was moving with a slow, steady, very heavy gait, and he was walking down the very middle of the street, which seemed super odd. As soon as we noticed him, he began moving from the center of the road and veering off towards his left, as if he was intending to come up onto the sidewalk and face us. My heart instantly began racing, and I pulled my friend closer to me. We kept walking but slowed down just a little, anticipating his move onto the sidewalk. There were cars lined up against the sidewalk, parked at a diagonal, and the man stepped between 2 of the cars in order to reach us. But he didn't emerge. As we came closer to where he should have been, I was afraid he was going to jump out from between the cars at us, but he wasn't there. This would have been enough to totally freak me out, but at that moment I looked up, and there he was, now nearly 20 feet ahead of us, walking down the middle of the street again, but this time walking away from us and towards the bar. At this point I knew something very weird was going on, and I became absolutely fixated on him. I wanted to study every little nuance of his movement, just trying to process what the hell was even going on. I could see his black boots sticking out from the bottom of the cloak. It went all the way down to his ankles. I watched how the fabric swayed heavily with his lumbered steps. He looked huge and powerful. He looked just as solid and real as me or my friends or you. As he drew closer to the bar, he began, again, veering off towards the sidewalk and the entrance to the bar. The bar was on the same side of the street as us, and we were about 1 block away at this time. He stepped up onto the sidewalk and headed directly for the entrance. At this point, 2 women walked out of the bar and walked right past him. I mean, like, practically brushed up against him, but never acknowledged his presence. They then stood outside just a foot or 2 away from him, talking and flipping their hair, never even glancing back once. They definitely did not see him. At this same instant, I noticed that he stopped at the entrance of the bar. There is a really big, super bright sign just above the entrance that glows the name of the bar, so he was practically illuminated now. With him standing there, I had a clear perspective of his height. He was taller than the top of the door. The tip of his hood was only a few inches below the bottom of the lit-up sign. He had his head slightly down, and I noticed that his feet seemed to be stuck mid-step. It was the strangest thing. It was like looking at a computer glitch. One foot was in front of the other, slightly raised up, with the heel touching the ground, but he was just rocking back and forth like he was stuck in the motion of taking a step. Then our drunk friend, who noticed none of this, said something, and I glanced in her direction. When I looked back at him a millisecond later, he was gone. We even went into the bar, and there was nowhere he could have gone. They had CCTV cameras with the videos being displayed right above the bar, but I was too shy to ask if they could check the footage. This experience has absolutely haunted me ever since. His presence didn't feel scary. I was afraid right at first when I thought it was some creepy man wandering the streets in a hooded cape, but when I realized it wasn't human, I felt calm and almost comforted by his energy. I couldn't stop talking about it afterward and wondering what it was that we saw. We passed by the bar several more times over the rest of our stay, and each time there was a person just standing there, leaning up against a pole outside the bar, who either followed us for a block or tried to talk to us, and it just seemed odd. My friend strangely began kind of seeming to detach herself from me as the days progressed. We were roommates at the time, and when we got home from the trip, she dropped me off at our apartment and went straight to her boyfriend's. I didn't see or hear from her for almost a week. It really felt like she was trying to avoid me, and I started spiraling into a deep depression. Within 4 months, our friendship had completely deteriorated in the worst way. We stopped being friends altogether and are no longer friends at all. Although there are clear circumstances that led to this, and I take responsibility for my role in the breakup, I always wonder if that encounter in Arizona influenced any of it to happen. When I look back, it really seemed like there was some kind of turning point in the way she felt towards me after that. Just to be clear, ever since we stopped being friends, my life has been richer and more joyous and fulfilling than ever before. All of these things in my life practically rearranged themselves when she and I began fighting, and now I'm genuinely happier and feel more loved and supported than I ever had. Whether or not Cloaked Entity had anything to do with this, I'm very grateful to have had that experience. It's the most potent, paranormal, and mysterious experience I've had to date. In 1998, myself and 2 friends, Alicia and Amy, decided to vacation in Lake Havasu, Arizona for spring break. We set out on our road trip in Alicia's Ford Tempo and stayed the night at a friend's place in Las Vegas before continuing on our journey. The next day, we were about 40 minutes away from our hotel near Lake Havasu when this creepy encounter occurred. It was around 11 p.m. as we drove through one of the many mountainous areas leading to our destination. The roads were curvy and the night sky was pitch black, with no other traffic helping to illuminate the area. Alicia slowed down to 25 miles per hour and was being extra careful when we came up on a semi-truck who was also traveling at a slow pace. Rather than try to pass him on a dangerous road, Alicia slowed down even more. Suddenly, a blinding white light appeared out of nowhere, causing the truck to swerve and veer off the road into the dirt. Alicia jammed on the brakes, and we stopped 20 yards or so behind the truck, easing off to the side of the road. The 3 of us sat there squinting, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Suddenly, the truck's driver's side door flew open, but we never saw a man climb out. Then, the radio dial in Alicia's car went crazy and started scanning through a bunch of channels before turning to static. As we all sat there breathless and in awe, the light zoomed away, leaving us again in darkness, with the exception of our headlights and the truck's red brake lights. We exited the car and tentatively began approaching the semi-truck to go see if the driver was okay, and to discuss the insane thing that we all had just witnessed. The driver was gone. We called out hello numerous times. Hello? 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 And took a flashlight to look down the side of the mountain, which was on the right-hand side of the truck. It was a steep hill, but little vegetation, so we were able to see everything as we scanned the area to make sure the driver hadn't somehow fallen down the embankment. We shined the light inside the open driver's side door of the still running truck. Nothing. This man had completely disappeared, yet none of us saw him leave at any point. We got back into the car and waited another 5 minutes before yelling out one more bout of hellos. Hello? Hello? And finally giving up. In hindsight, we probably should have called the police when we got to town, but we didn't. We just checked into the hotel room, once contemplating whether or not we should drive back to the site and see if the truck was still there and still running, but we were all exhausted and never followed through. During the next 2 days, several issues occurred with Alicia's car. It was in good working order before the incident, but was now having a host of electrical problems. The radio continued to go berserk. The doors would sporadically lock and unlock themselves. The automatic windows refused to work, and on our drive back to Reno, the engine just shut down out of nowhere, and the car lost all power. After letting it rest about half an hour, it started back up, and we were able to get to a small roadside shop to have them take a look and test the battery. They said everything seemed to be in good condition, and were stumped as to what caused the problems. As we were getting ready to leave, Alicia started the car, but went back inside briefly while Amy and I sat in the car. Once again, it lost all power. Before we could exit, all of the doors locked, and the little metal spokes would not budge. In 100-degree heat, we were trapped inside the vehicle, but thankfully, the mechanic had a tool to unlock the doors, so we were able to exit. Once again, he inspected under the hood, but could find no reason for any of this. A few minutes later, the car started back up. Thankfully, the rest of the drive home went smoothly. The car never experienced such issues again, with the exception of the wonky radio dial changing on its own. I had moved up to the quiet town of Flagstaff, Arizona to go to graduate school at the local university. Flagstaff was teeming with life as a town, and it was beginning to grow into a city, but it also harbored the spirits of those who have passed. I stayed in Flagstaff for 3 years and lived off campus. In the first house, I lived with my boyfriend at the time, and a friend from high school. While there, my friend and I had a terrible falling out. A year later, we moved into an apartment with my boyfriend's brother and his girlfriend at the time. Once again, there was a terrible falling out, in which the girlfriend was convinced that I was evil and the devil. This led to my relationship with my boyfriend ending, along with other reasons, and I moved into a different apartment outside of the city. My sister decided to move in with me and started attending the university too. Overall, my few years living in Flagstaff was full of turmoil and negative energy, which I think may have had something to do with what occurs next. My sister and I enjoyed our little apartment together. We would binge watch TV shows and play Halo 3 until the early morning hours. But as time went on, we noticed strange events occurring in and around the apartment complex. In Flagstaff, the apartments are not fitted with AC units, so we had the windows open all hours of the day and night. Every now and then, at night, we would hear ear-piercing screams coming from a nearby apartment. They were the screams of a woman, and she would scream for a few seconds and then stop. There wasn't any music playing like it was a party or something. Rather, it would just be still and quiet after the screaming. I believe the first or second time we heard the screams, my sister tried to call the police, but nothing ever came of it. My bedroom had vaulted ceilings, and I had a friend over who could see spirits. I had felt that my room had negative energy all along, but I assumed it was due to my internal turmoil. But while in my room, my friend noticed that there was something sitting in the corner at the top of the vaulted ceiling. She said that it was watching us, so we moved to the living room and continued our conversation there. Jump forward a couple of months. I was at school one day and received a call from my sister. She was frantic and told me my cat had fallen off of his cat tree, which was in my bedroom, and he had hurt his leg. My cat was only 3 years old at the time, and he's a little goofy but always catches himself when he falls. In addition, the cat tree had fallen completely over, like someone had pushed it, and this was a 6-foot heavy tree that would need some force to be pushed over. My sister was able to get my cat into his carrier and we took him to the vet. Thankfully, there wasn't anything seriously wrong with him. Not long after this happened, my sister was at home with the cats, I had 2 of them, while I was at school. She recorded them acting very strangely. My black cat with yellow-green eyes was hiding under my sister's bed and wouldn't come out. He was staring wide-eyed at my other cat. the one that had fallen, who was hunched down, just staring at my open bedroom door. My sister tried to interact with the cats for about 15 minutes, but both ignored her and remained fixated on this door. She closed the door to my bedroom, and slowly the cats made their way over to it and began sniffing and checking it out. Once the door was closed, they began acting normally again. A little while later, I was sleeping in my bedroom after a long day at school. I remember that my sister was out of town. I woke up in the middle of the night, thinking that a cat had made some kind of noise that startled me awake. I looked towards the door to see if they were playing, but instead, my eyes were greeted with a dark figure. This person looked to be about my height, around 5'8", and had curly, short hair. I felt as if it was a male presence, and he had broad shoulders and a square-shaped body. I couldn't make out any facial features. He just looked like a dark shadow. I didn't feel afraid or worried. I just saw him, stared at him for a few seconds, and then went right back to sleep. And after that, not many more occurrences happened. Later on, we needed to get a few things fixed in the apartment, so the maintenance guy came by. We got to talking with him and jokingly said how our apartment was haunted. He looked at us with a straight face and told us the complex was haunted. He had other tenants tell him about weird occurrences and possible hauntings. At least we knew we weren't the only ones to have these weird experiences. This is my dad's true story of his experience with the paranormal. After I had gotten married in 2003, I purchased a house in Arizona City, Arizona. The first night I moved in, while my wife was still in Phoenix getting her things together and saying goodbye, I was awakened after 3 a.m. by the sound of the fire alarms going off. One was in the room I was sleeping in, and the other was in the hallway leading up to the room. After I was unable to determine the cause, I went back to bed, and 15 minutes later, it happened again. I didn't know that this was just going to be the beginning of a series of crazy events that took place after we moved in. My stepson started having an imaginary friend he called Casper, and started sleepwalking, which never happened before we moved there. At one time, my wife was looking around for him in the middle of the night because he wasn't sleeping on his bed, and she found him sleeping under his bed. One night we were sleeping and the TV came on a little after 2. Nobody preset anything, it just clicked on by itself. I would often hear the sound of children playing outside around the same time. One night I had to go to bed early because I had training for my job the next morning, and at one point I looked up, and at the end of my bed I saw my stepson's figure standing there. I told him, "Eric, I have training early, what do you want?" But as I looked away and glanced up again, there was no one there. I went to the living room and asked my wife if he had come into my room, and she told me no, that he had went to bed about an hour ago, and sure enough, he was in his bed sleeping. There was another night when I was working my graveyard shift, and my wife was in the garage working on her art. She saw a figure of a man's head staring in from the garage window. On another occasion, she said that the garage opened by itself at night while she was sitting in the house. Another morning, I noticed the hatch that led up to the attic was open, but no one can reach it without a ladder. Once I got a hold of a ladder, I went up and saw 3 dead birds in the attic. I don't know how they got there since there was no openings from the outside, and they were fairly fresh and not decayed like they would be if they had been in there since it was built. They weren't small like sparrows. I think they were pigeons. One night we heard a large boom on the roof, but found nothing. And another day, a huge microburst sent our gas grill flying into the block wall in our backyard. Then, we got this infestation of gnats or some type of bug, wherein if you walk in the backyard, the ground looks like it's moving, and the walls also appear to be moving because of all of the bugs. Neither house on either side of us had any bugs. It was just us. Our marriage started to go downhill, and when we decided to split, Everything just stopped. She moved out, and I stayed there a few more months until I sold the house, and in that time, no strange occurrences happened. In fact, the day that she left, the bugs I had been fighting all along left too. So I don't know if it was the energy of our house or our energy together, but that's my experience with the paranormal. This happened in Prescott, Arizona. I don't really remember much as I was only about 8 years old, but I had lost something dear to me. Since I was a toddler, I had a brass duck. I carried it everywhere with me, and it was lost. I looked for a few days and I couldn't find it, but one night something happened. I laid down to go to bed and closed my eyes to drift to sleep. Time passed and I'm woken up by a bright light coming from my door. My mom had stayed up and I assumed it was her checking on me. I tried to look, but the light was too bright. Even still, I could make out a slight silhouette of a woman, my mother. She entered my room and walked to my dresser and opened it, then closed it and left closing the door slowly. I thought nothing of it and rolled over and went back to sleep. In the morning, I woke up and proceeded with the morning as usual. I got dressed and went out to the kitchen for breakfast. Then it hit me. "Hey, Ma, what did you put in my drawer last night?" But she looked confused. "I didn't put anything in there last night. I didn't go into your room at all." I was surprised, but didn't want her freaking out about someone going into my room. She's really good at making something out of nothing. So I said I must have been dreaming and finished my breakfast. Curious, I went to my room and opened my drawer, and to my surprise, there it was, my brass duck. It was sitting on top of my underwear like it was there all along. I sat down and began recalling everything I remember from last night. The light, the woman, the drawer opening and closing, and then the woman leaving. I thought about it over and over, and then realized the light I saw wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from the woman. It was the only explanation for only being able to make out a silhouette the whole time. If it was the hallway light, more of her would have been visible as she entered a dark space. I'm no stranger to paranormal things. I've been hearing and seeing things throughout my life, albeit a short one at the time, so I accepted it as a kind spirit returning my lost, prized possession to me. Time has passed and my memory has faded, but ever since I realized it, the image of her walking into my room has never left me, and thankfully, neither has my brass duck. It sits on my shelf in my room to this day, a friendly reminder that even in the spectral plane, where so many horror stories come from, genuine good still exists. Sedona, in the late 70s into the early 80s, was sparsely populated. In fact, we had one of the first houses in the village of Oak Creek. Our backyard was nestled up into the Red Rock Formation, tall, slick, and majestic. I was about 9 or 10 years old, and my little sister was near 5 or 6. We were explorers. Every time we were out in the juniper shrub desert, chasing lizards, snakes, and the occasional golf balls, as our home was near a newly built golf course. Heavy rains carved deep drainage channels. Much like the slot canyons found in Utah, the two of us would fancy ourselves queens and princesses of the land and wander the canals as if they were golden brick roads. After months of exploring the desert and around our house near the golf course, we took our adventures to another level. The majestic red rock formation behind the house was calling out to us. I don't know how to explain it other than the mountain spirit seemed to be pulling us in. So, as the oldest and very protective of my little sister, I commissioned to climb up the mountain by myself. I would check it out first to make sure it was safe for my little sister to traverse. While my sister was at her beloved tap dance lesson, I put on my tennis shoes and set out on the Red Rock Mountain Trail behind our house. It took longer than I thought to get to the base of the sheer cliffs, and the formation was much larger than my brain had rationalized. I began my ascension up the cliff face, my small fingers grasping at the layers of rock. With fingernails digging into the sandstone, my thoughts were on my footing. Each step was systematically placed on natural footholds within the rock face. Inch by inch, my tiny body zigzagged, and I climbed up to a small cave opening. It had taken me about 45 minutes to climb the face and reach the cave, but now I knew the pathway to it. The next time would be shorter and more manageable. Once inside, I stood up and shook the loose dirt from my pant legs and hands. I brushed my red hair aside and straightened my body. Awestruck, I observed walls etched with animal drawings, the ceiling tainted with smoke fire, and remnants of an old fire pit centered on the floor. The side of the cave was not smoothly round. It was smooth, but had shelves carved into each side. I understood these to be the beds the Native Americans used in their cozy cave homes. Scenes of a small family mingling after daily gatherings and occasional hunting filled my head. I could imagine 2 children. One was a girl about 3 and a boy about 5 years old. Their mother lovingly prepared food such as bread made from grain smashed in the molcajete. Their father would be carrying quail meat to the fire. I imagined a peaceful scene, the family enjoying each other's company and welcoming rest from a hard day's labor. I too sat down on the red ground and crossed my legs. For a moment I was one of them. For a moment I was free to be in their world. I turned my petite body around to peer outside the cave opening onto the ground. I was facing south. The sun was beginning to set to my right, tinges of copper shimmering and covering the fields below. I could see our small house, nestled in the landscape. Suddenly, I heard a faint voice of my sister, praising her beloved tap shoes. Her eyes grew wide and her mouth fell open as she scanned the inside of this magical cave. My sister and I were fortunate enough to have entered into what we called our magical cave dwelling. The cave spoke to us. We felt safe, secure, loved, and at home. We hiked to that cave almost every day that summer. Our family was set to move right before the start of the new school year. Knowing this, my sister and I made our last hike up to the cave and had sort of a send-off party for the spirits that had guided us and kept us safe all that summer. We sang songs, thanked the mountains, rocks, animals, insects, and even the Native American family for sharing their home with us. Tearful, we gathered our things one last time, blew kisses throughout the cave, and stepped out for the last time. Dusk was high in the sky. The desert was sweet from the recent rain, and our eyes were steered to see up high above the mountains. As I peered, the silence was cut with a swoosh, then silence, then swoosh, swoosh, and my sight adjusted and focused on the wings of power, enormous engulfing wings of a thunderbird. Its wingspan must have been 20 or more feet, and its body was taller than me, its talons curled but sharp, beak closed and slender, and it had eyes of piercing black fire. The mystical thunderbird soared overhead, peered down at us as if to say, "You are special creatures in this world too." The thunderbird transcended emotions and feelings to my sister and me of peace, protection, eternal love, and acceptance. Thunderbird still lives in my heart. As I write this, my tears welled up in appreciation for nature's magical creatures and the spiritual powers they share with the smallest of minds, we humans. You would not expect the state that this took place in, Arizona. I won't name the ice rink due to possibly giving it a bad name and such, but everyone I worked with agrees it's haunted. Now, it's not a demon or anything bad, it's just a little boy. I personally have never experienced anything other than shadows, reflections, and noises. This is more focused on my colleague, or boss, should I say, who was a very straightforward person and would not lie about such things. I believe her based on my experiences. The story goes a kid who played hockey in the 70s was on his way to practice or a game at the rink and died unfortunately in a terrible car accident a mile away. He was only 10 or 12, very young. This is who we believe haunts the rink, and we only found this out after the incident. The person who closes at night would work from 7 to 2 a.m. Usually you would leave at 1, because no one is around to check on you. Her story starts around 1-ish. The last person has to Zamboni the ice and resurface it to make it clean and fresh for the morning. She was locking up and mopping the floors towards the front when she hears a bench door open from the benches where the players sit. Mind you, these doors are loud. If you're alone in that rink, basically any door to get onto the ice can be heard. She turns and sees a little kid in old hockey gear and a wood stick. If you know hockey, nobody uses a wood stick anymore, let alone the helmets from the 70s because they're hard to find. His helmet wasn't a full cage. It's like what you would see a pro wear, which is very uncommon for kids and not allowed to be worn unless you're over 18. Well, here's this little kid on the far side of the ice from her, wearing his helmet and skating gear from the 70s. He skates a few circles close to the bench, hops off, and walks about 50 feet to the locker room and opens the door. Now, she wasn't too scared because the last skate ended about 45 minutes ago, so she runs over to the kid thinking that someone's dad thought they were slick and could steal some ice time. As she got to the door, she opens it, and then the door to the shower closes as she gets there. She runs through the shower, which connects to another locker room, and that door in the locker room connecting to the ice rink closes at the same time. As she comes out of the door, she sees no one. Now she starts freaking out. She looks on the ice and clearly sees the skate marks and fresh snow chopped from the skating. They're clear as day. She runs to the front door, locks it up, and calls her boyfriend down the street, crying to come help her because she saw a ghost. He shows up and confirms that yes, someone had skated on the ice. The next day is when she looked up the possible deaths and asked the owner, my longtime good friend's father, if he knew anything about the deaths surrounding the rink. That's when he tells us about the boy. Let me preface this by saying I'm not claiming this to be any particular phenomenon. I'm telling you what happened exactly how it happened. No exaggeration or lying of any kind. 20 years ago, my older brother and I, 19 and 15 at the time, were working a landscaping job in northern Arizona. We had gotten off work at the site around 7 p.m., hopped into his truck, and started the 45-minute commute home. On the way back, there's a dirt road that leads 20 miles into the middle of the desert. It's mainly there to take dirt bikes or go four-wheeling, etc., but we would use it as a good spot to stop and smoke, while avoiding prying eyes. So we drive a few miles in and park in between these two hills that hide the truck and us pretty well. We've done this about 30 times up to this point, though never again after that night. We stop, and I commence the ritual of breaking it up to roll. My brother was talking about something, but I wasn't really listening until I heard his voice change. "Did you hear that?" he asked. We both listen, and I heard a high-pitched, tinny sound for a split second, and then complete silence. The desert is actually a pretty loud place at night. I remember realizing that when the sound was gone. As we sat there for 5 more seconds, my brother gasps and starts driving. I'm asking him what's going on, but he's not saying anything. We hit the street and the lights of the passing cars show his face. He's pale and completely wide-eyed, and his mouth was open. I got scared at seeing him in so much fear, and just sat there waiting for him to stop. He finally stopped at a McDonald's parking lot when we got back into town. He was crying. I just pat him on the shoulder and waited. After a few minutes, he asked me if I remember. "Remember what, man? We were in the desert for like 5 minutes before you went flying out like a crazy asshole." He looked at me and started sobbing. He said it had me, and he couldn't do anything. He said it took me. At this point, I started putting some things together. It was quiet out, no cars. I looked at one of those billboard clocks and saw that it was 11:11 p.m. My brother told me something had grabbed me through my closed passenger window. He went for his pistol when he suddenly froze and couldn't move because the thing told him that if he didn't stay right where he was, that I would die and he would be next. He said he felt it in his heart to be true. The thing that had me was very tall, thin, and had huge black eyes. He says he doesn't remember anything else about it. He sat frozen in absolute terror for hours while the thing disappeared with me into the desert. Then suddenly I appeared in the truck and he gunned it out of there. Over the years, I've talked to him about it twice. He hates to even mention it. He's ashamed, I think, and still very afraid of it. He changed after this, always seeming to be less energetic and a little withdrawn. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish I could help. I told him that he's blameless, and I thanked him for getting us out of there. That's all I could do. I've considered multiple times to get hypnotized to see if I could recover some of the memories, but whenever I think about it, I remember the light flashing over his face and the sheer terror I saw there. I think it's better not to know. This takes place in Phoenix, Arizona when I was about 7 years old. During this time of my life, I was experiencing a lot of paranormal things, but this one has always stood out to me. I was upstairs and getting ready to nap. I rarely liked to be alone as a child. We never really knew why, but I just always wanted to be around another person. This time, however, no one could nap with me. I grabbed my trusted teddy bear, who was basically the same size as me at that point, and went into the spare room to sleep. I remember climbing into the bed that was pressed against one side of the room. The walls were dark except for the dim yellow light from the hallway, escaping through the cracks around the door frame. I want to mention that I wasn't asleep when this happened, nor was I close to being asleep. I remember I was upset about being alone and that was keeping me up. My eyes began adjusting to the darkness as my teddy bear and I settled in. As I continued to try to get comfortable, still wishing someone was around me, I changed position and rolled onto my back. My sight instantly moved, as if instructed, to the corner of the ceiling where I saw a dark mass. My eyes finally fully adjusted, and I made out this gargoyle-type creature, stuck with 2 limbs on the ceiling and the other 2 on the wall. It was looking at me with emotionless eyes. Its body looked like it was made of literal stone, like a real gargoyle. I saw flecks of black and brown within the overall concrete gray color. It looked like a lizard or small dragon of some sort. It had short horns, spikes lining its back, and a stubbed, wide snout. As I fully comprehended what I was witnessing, the creature began to run quickly around the perimeter of the room, still upside down on the ceiling. It ran so fast, it turned into a black blur and lost all defining features. I honestly don't remember if I passed out. It wouldn't be the first time I did after witnessing paranormal phenomena, or left the room, but I remember telling my mom in a panic shortly after. This wasn't the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, but I do remember being frightened of it. I thought maybe my young imagination somehow was able to develop this, but I recently heard someone describing almost exactly what I saw. They said it was outside in their backyard, crawling on their power line. Maybe these things really are out there. If they are, I'm not sure I ever want to know, or ever want to see one again. I used to live in northern Arizona in a town called Page. The town is on Lake Powell and nearby Horseshoe Bend, which are both massive tourist attractions recently. It also happens to border the Navajo Reservation and has a population that is majority Native. I'm currently 18. I moved away less than a month ago, so I lived my whole life in the town essentially. I have heard stories, many stories from my friends and their parents as well, but these 2 stories are my actual experiences. I'll post their stories later. The first story happened about 1.5 years ago. Since Page is a 60-mile drive from the next closest town, the nearby area is very popular among locals for jackrabbit, coyote, and bobcat hunting. This particular day I was out on my own, far back on some of the local dirt trails. pretty recently after I had started hunting myself. My target was coyotes, and this was before I had a call, so I had to look for them and bait them, and my firearm was an A. Springfield Saint AR-15, loaded with American Eagle 55 grain AP shells, which, yes, is an important detail. It was probably around noon, and I had wandered down into a wash that ran up to and across the bottom of one of the sandstone cliff sides of the area. While walking through the wash, I scared probably the biggest coyote I have ever seen on that side of the cliff face. As it was scaling, I took 3 shots at it, and I was able to hit at least one because it started bleeding quite profusely as it made its way up to the top. The cliff turned into a flat mesa, covered by shrubs and dried up bushes, probably about knee-high at most. I'm 5'10", so not very tall. With no coyote in sight, I started to follow the blood trail. After about 20 minutes of following, I was very confused and somewhat concerned. The blood trail was still thick. Too much was being spilt to allow the coyote to continue a straight sprint for that long, and I was hunting with a round that would drop a mountain lion in its tracks. After about 10 more minutes, the tracks from the coyote met up with the tracks from what I'm assuming were goat tracks. This is where I turned and got the hell out of there. Both tracks were recent, deep, and the sand was still loose enough to fall when I kneeled down to look at them. The tracks split from one another, the coyote going far off to the left and the goats going to the right. The blood trail, though, no longer followed the tracks of the coyote, but instead indicated that the goat had been shot. The tracks led down to another wash in the area known for being bad news, so I got back to my truck fast after that. The second story took place near the outskirts of town and has a video that comes with it. Me and my friends were out around 10 at night, near one of the local jogging trails. At the edge of one of these trails, a storm drain tunnel opening sticks out. We always used to joke about skinwalkers using it to hide from joggers or bikers, but never paid much attention to it. This night, though, we decided to go into the storm drain to see for ourselves. I, of course, was the first one in, and had 5 people behind me. We were probably 300 feet in when I heard what sounded like claws scraping against concrete ahead of me. I could only see about 50 feet in front of me with my light, so I shushed everyone behind me. As soon as we go quiet, a moan resonates through the tunnel. I have never backtracked on all 4 so fast in my life. The storm drain leads to a nearby road, which the people who were too scared to go into the tunnel were looking at, but they were not on the road or anywhere near the opening of the road. They were even taking Snapchats at the time of the noise, showing us that 1, it wasn't them, and 2, there were no cars on the road at the time. I can't prove that these were skinwalkers, but they definitely weren't any person or animal I've ever encountered in my lifetime. Here's the video. Wear headphones to hear it well.
Nobody move.